The scent of burnt sugar and stale coffee usually brought Anya Petrova a small, familiar comfort. It was the smell of her reality. A double shift at the local cafe, a tiny apartment, and the crushing weight of medical bills. But on that Tuesday afternoon, the air was thick with something else. The sharp, metallic tang of power. It arrived in the form of Elias Thorne. He didn't walk into the cafe. He commanded it. The bell above the door chimed a timid welcome, but the sound was immediately swallowed by the silence his presence imposed. He was a figure carved from granite and tailored in Italian wool, a man whose reputation as a corporate predator preceded him like a dark, cold wind. Anya, wiping down the counter, felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She knew why he was here. The final desperate plea for an extension on her brother's treatment had been denied that morning. Elias Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries, was not a man who waited for a debt to mature. He came to collect. He didn't order. He simply leaned against the counter, his eyes, the color of glacial ice, drilling into hers. "Anya Petrova," he stated, his voice a low, resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate through the cheap ceramic mugs. "I've been looking for you." Anya gripped the damp cloth tighter. "The espresso machine is broken, Mr. Thorne. You'll have to settle for a drip." A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed his face. "I don't drink coffee, Miss Petrova. I drink power. And right now, you're in desperate need of some." He slid a thick, leather-bound contract across the counter. It was a physical manifestation of his dominance, heavy and intimidating. "I know about your brother," he continued, his voice devoid of sympathy. "I know about the debt. And I have a proposition that will solve all your problems." Anya's breath hitched. She knew the name Thorne. She knew the name Petrova. Her father, the brilliant, gentle founder of Petrova Corp., had been systematically ruined by Elias Thorne a decade ago. The man standing before her was the architect of her family's downfall, the reason she was now scrubbing floors instead of inheriting an empire. But her brother's life was not a luxury she could afford to sacrifice for pride. "Marry me," Elias said, cutting through her thoughts. "For 1 year, you get a 7-figure sum deposited tonight, enough to save your brother and keep you comfortable for life." Anya's mind raced. Marry him? The sheer audacity of the man. "And what do you get?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Thorne Industries is merging with a major conglomerate," he explained, his eyes scanning the room as if bored by the conversation. "They require a stable, family-oriented CEO, a wife. You fit the profile. You're beautiful, discreet, and desperate." "I am not desperate!" she spat, the word tasting like ash. Elias's smile was cruel. "Your brother's life support says otherwise. Read the contract. Sign it. Tonight." That night, in the sterile, silent opulence of Elias Thorne's office, Anya sat across a desk that felt as vast as a battlefield. She read the contract. It was a document of absolute control. No intimacy required, no emotional attachment allowed, a strict code of conduct, and a non-disclosure agreement that would silence a saint. As her hand hovered over the signature line, she remembered her father's last words. "Get close to the enemy, Anya. Only then can you reclaim what is ours." She wasn't signing a marriage contract. She was signing a declaration of war. She signed with a steady hand, her signature a promise of vengeance. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Thorne," Elias said, picking up the contract. "Now let's go shopping. You need to look the part." Anya's life became a meticulously choreographed performance. She was the perfect wife, stunning on Elias's arm, silent in his presence, and utterly compliant with his rules. The penthouse was a gilded cage, a monument to his success and her sacrifice. The first major test came at the Thorne Industries annual gala. Anya was dressed in a gown that cost more than her entire college tuition, her hand resting lightly on Elias's forearm. "Remember the rules, Anya," he murmured, his breath cool against her ear. You are my accessory tonight. You smile when I tell you to smile. You speak only when spoken to, and you never, ever question me." She smiled, a dazzling, empty expression that fooled everyone but him. "Understood, Mr. Thorne." As they navigated the sea of corporate sharks, Anya wasn't just smiling. She was observing. She was the ghost in the machine, collecting data. She watched the subtle shifts in power, the nervous glances of the board members, and the predatory gleam in the eyes of Elias's rivals. She was no longer an art student. She was a spy in the house of her enemy. One evening, a few weeks into their arrangement, Anya found herself in the library, poring over old financial reports she'd managed to sneak out of Elias's private study. She was looking for the final damning evidence of his corporate raid on Petrova Corp. She didn't hear him enter. "Reading up on the competition, Mrs. Thorne?" Elias's voice cut through the silence. Anya slammed the book shut, her heart leaping into her throat. "Just trying to understand the world I've been thrown into, Elias." He walked toward her, his shadow engulfing her. He didn't look angry, only intensely curious. "You're a fast learner," he conceded, his eyes lingering on her face. "Most women would be content with the credit cards and the jewelry. You look for the blueprints." "I like to know the architecture of my cage," she retorted, meeting his gaze. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "A cage you willingly entered. Don't forget that, Anya. You signed the contract." He backed her against the bookshelf, the leather-bound volumes pressing into her back. The proximity was electric, charged with unspoken tension. He wasn't just dominant in the boardroom, he was dominant in every breath he took. "You're playing a dangerous game, Anya," he whispered, his lips inches from hers. "Defiance is a luxury you cannot afford." "And underestimation is a mistake you cannot afford, Elias," she whispered back, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. He didn't kiss her. Instead, he placed a single, cold finger beneath her chin, tilting her head up. "Good. Keep that fire. It makes you interesting." He turned and left, leaving Anya trembling, not from fear, but from the terrifying realization that the line between her hatred and a strange, volatile attraction was blurring. As the months passed, the merger loomed closer, and the stakes grew impossibly high. Anya had found the evidence, a series of shell companies and illegal transactions that proved Elias had systematically dismantled Petrova Corp. But the evidence was complex, buried deep in a web of corporate deceit. She needed a way to present it, a way to ensure her victory was absolute. She began to use her position as his wife to her advantage. At a dinner party with a rival CEO, she subtly planted a seed of doubt about Elias's integrity. In a conversation with a key board member, she accidentally mentioned a small, overlooked detail in the merger agreement that caused a ripple of panic. Elias noticed the change. He saw the new confidence in her eyes, the way she held herself, the subtle power she wielded in social settings. One night, he confronted her in the middle of the penthouse living room. "Who are you, Anya?" he demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. "You're not the desperate girl I found in that coffee shop. You're too sharp, too observant. You're playing a game, and I want to know the rules." Anya remained calm, pouring herself a glass of water. "I'm your wife, Elias. I'm simply learning to play the game of the elite. You taught me well." "Don't lie to me," he growled, closing the distance between them. "I saw the way you looked at the Petrova Corp file yesterday. Why the interest in a dead company?" Anya turned, her eyes flashing with a calculated vulnerability. "Because it reminds me of my father, Elias. He was a small business owner. He lost everything to men like you. I look at that file and I see the cost of your ambition. It reminds me why I'm here." The mention of her father, the subtle hint of a shared past, was enough to throw him off balance. Elias, the dominant CEO, had a blind spot, his own guilt. He had ruined countless lives, and he carried the weight of that destruction. "Don't confuse me with a conscience, Anya," he said, his voice softening slightly. I did what was necessary. Did you? She challenged. Or did you do what was easy? The moment hung heavy between them. Elias, the man who controlled billions, was momentarily speechless. Anya had found his weakness, and she knew exactly how to exploit it. She had to move fast. The merger was set for the following week. The day of the merger arrived, a cold, gray morning that mirrored the tension in the air. The boardroom was a fortress of glass and steel, filled with the most powerful figures in the city. Elias was at the head of the table, radiating a smug, almost palpable sense of victory. Anya was seated beside him, the picture of the dutiful, beautiful wife. She wore a simple black dress, a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of the other wives. She was silent, but her silence was a weapon. Gentlemen, Elias announced, tapping a pen on the mahogany table. Let's finalize this. The acquisition of Petrova Corp by Thorn Industries is a done deal. Sign the papers, and we can all go home rich. The Petrova Corp board members, looking defeated, began to reach for their pens. Wait! A voice cut through the room. The door opened, and a figure walked in. Anya's personal lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. Elias scowled. Who is this? This is a private meeting. Ms. Davies ignored him, walking straight to Anya and placing a single, sealed document in her hand. Anya stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and it drew every eye in the room. She walked to the center of the table, her gaze fixed on Elias. Mr. Thorn, Anya began, her voice clear and strong, no longer the timid whisper of the barista. I apologize for the interruption, but there has been a change in ownership. Elias laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. A change? You're my wife, Anya. You have no ownership here. Anya placed the document on the table. It was a transfer of ownership for the controlling shares of Petrova Corp. I am Anya Petrova, she stated, her voice ringing with the authority of a true heiress, the sole heir and controlling shareholder of Petrova Corp, and I am not here to sell. I am here to buy. The room erupted in chaos. Elias was on his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. This is a joke, he roared, slamming his fist on the table. You're my wife. You signed a contract. You needed the money for your brother. Anya picked up the contract he had forced her to sign months ago. I did. I signed a contract to be your fake wife. I never signed a contract to sell my family's legacy. She looked him dead in the eye. You were so focused on my desperation, Elias. You missed the fine print. Petrova Corp was never the target. You were. My father knew you were circling his company. He set up a trust, a contingency plan. The only way to activate the controlling shares was for me to be in a position of absolute trust with the acquiring party. She slid a new document across the table. A hostile takeover bid for Thorn Industries. You thought you were dominant, Anya continued, her voice dripping with cold triumph. You thought you could control me. But you were wrong. You were so wrong. Elias stood defeated, his empire crumbling around him. You used me, he whispered, the words heavy with betrayal. Anya leaned in, her eyes blazing with a new, genuine dominance that eclipsed his own. I'm not paying a price, Elias. I'm collecting a debt. You destroyed my father's reputation to make your first billion. Now I'm taking it all back. She signed the final acquisition papers, her hand steady and sure. The applause from the Petrova board members was a quiet, respectful thunder. Have Mr. Thorn escorted out, Anya commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of the new CEO. And please clean up the mess. Elias was packing a small bag in the penthouse, the silence of the vast space now heavy with his defeat. Anya watched him from the sofa, the power dynamic completely reversed. You played the long game, Elias said, his voice bitter. I almost admire it. But you're just like me, a ruthless opportunist. No, Elias, Anya said softly, standing and walking toward him. I'm not like you. I did this for justice. You did it for greed. He turned to her, his eyes narrowed. The contract is void. The marriage is over. You have what you wanted. Not quite, Anya countered, stopping just inches from him. The contract was voided the moment I acquired your company, but the marriage, that's a different story. She reached up and touched his cheek. Elias, for the first time, looked uncertain, vulnerable. You thought you were dominant, she continued, her voice a low, intimate challenge. You thought you could control me. But you were wrong. You were so wrong. He grabbed her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. What do you want, Anya? You have the company. What more could you possibly want? Anya smiled, a slow, confident expression that promised both danger and delight. I want what I signed up for, she said, her eyes locking onto his. The power, the drama, and you. She stepped closer, her dominance now absolute. You may have lost your company, Elias, but you haven't lost me. You're mine now, and I own everything, including your obedience. She pulled his tie, bringing his face close to hers. Now, she whispered, her final line a command. Kiss your CEO.